Have you ever wondered if you would see the Ring Dragon of Ra in Dragon Ball? Well, episode 41 came pretty close, and to answer all of your questions, alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and I'm bringing you my review for episode 41 of Dragon Ball Super. And man, oh man, this episode was very fun to watch. Now, as we start off with the plot, obviously, this episode is going to be taking, an aftermath from the previous episode where Monaka basically defeated Hit by Hit throwing the fight, and they would obviously go through the process of trying to summon what is referred to as the Super Shenlong, and in the process of this, we meet King Zeno, who basically is the ruler of all 12 universes. He's so strong that Beerus even states that this guy is capable enough of destroying the entire universe with the blink of an eye, and you could see the level of fear that they had in him because he like once Zeno actually came into the scene, like they were bowing to him, they were being very nervous around him, and they were actually really surprised when Goku was actually shaking his hand. So that's the level of respect that they were giving him, and Goku was just talking to him so casually. And the funny thing is, if you look at King Zeno as a character, he didn't really seem like an authoritative, rude kind of guy. He just seemed like a cheerful, high-pitched, small guy. And of course, we've seen in Dragon Ball with Kid Goku, with Aurelie, this is typical Toriyama, in which he likes to make these really awkward, goofy-looking characters have these hidden powers and abilities that nobody would expect. Just like how Aurelie looks like this cute little robot girl, and she's so powerful, and the same thing for Goku, who was a kid. So I thought that was something that was really taking a nod at Akira Toriyama's writing style. Now, as we move on to the action of this episode, there really wasn't any. I mean, there was no action sequence at all, so there really isn't much to say there, but I do have some interesting details that I noted, and credit to Herms from Kanzenshu for pointing some of these out. First of all, Beerus stating that Zeno can wipe out the entire universe in the blink of an eye is a big detail in my opinion, because that's basically saying that King Zeno is so much stronger than everybody else from all the different respective universes that Beerus was basically lying out of his teeth when he was saying that, Monaka was the strongest person he ever fought. And we had already known that from before, once it was revealed that Monaka was an amateur. And I'm going to point something out about Monaka later on. But I think it was just interesting to note how much ahead Zeno is as compared to everybody else. And I know this is going to create a lot of Goku versus Superman and Zeno versus, the rest of the universe type of debates, because now people are going to say, well, we have a Dragon Ball character who's on that type of mystical power level scaling. So I think his power is going to change the way people view Dragon Ball from here on out. Now, when we move on to the next interesting detail, it's also the fact that the planet that they were hosting the Universe 6 tournament on was actually a Dragon Ball all along. I was honestly kind of bummed by that, because, not so much, but only because of the fact that I thought it was going to add a little bit more suspense if they went looking for like the 7th Dragon Ball instead of them being on it the entire time. I thought it was a cheap way to just save time, but the fact that they saved time by not dragging out the Universe 6 arc, I will wink that off, but I kind of just wish they did a little bit more with the last Dragon Ball. Now, in terms of the next detail I noticed is, I definitely have developed an even more in-depth, thought and idea towards a future video in talking about Whis, because it's revealed in this episode that Whis can speak to the gods, and I've always had a specific theory about Whis, and I kind of have put that video on the back burner because I felt that Dragon Ball Super would release more things about him. In doing so, I think it's really interesting to note that Whis definitely has a lot of mysteries behind himself, and the same thing would obviously go towards Vados, and I think this tells us a lot about who Whis might potentially be. Now, on an interesting note, I also found it kind of cool that they were in the middle of the two universes when the whole summoning effect of Super Shenlong was taking place, or Super Shenron, for those of you who are more familiar with the dub. I thought that was cool. And the last interesting detail I noticed is the fact that, as we see near the end of the episode, Monaka was basically, as it appears, like some type of driver, as he was wearing a hat, and, as credit for him defeating, Hit in the fight, Beerus gives him a whole ton of gold, and Monaka seemed happy for that, which I thought was really cool. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in my predictions. But in terms of the animation for this episode, I thought it was great. I think the animation for this episode couples with my most memorable moment, because I think when you look at this episode and you see the fact that, the animation was so spot on, and I'm not just talking about the artwork, you know, because there's a difference between animation and artwork. It was just greatly well done. It looked like a masterpiece. The music fit the pacing of the moment. It really truly felt like a genuine transformation of the Dragon Balls when we saw Super Shenlong coming out. And what I find interesting about all of this is that they didn't say anything specifically about, you know, the wish towards the actual Fighters of the Universe 7 arc, because what happened is once they actually made the wish, Beerus actually wished for planet Earth to be resurrected in Universe 6, but he kind of just winked it off towards Bulma and said that he wished for something silly like a bed. And I felt that that was kind of weird, because it's like Goku and the rest of the gang fought in this, you know, life or death tournament. Well, not necessarily life or death, but this tournament that was basically deciding the fate of the planet Earth. And as a result, they win, and then he just gives Earth to, you know, Champa's team. And I felt that was kind of weird, because couldn't they have made a better wish than that? That's personally the only thing I felt was a bummer. But you know what, Beerus clearly cares about his brother. So I thought that that was okay and well done. But definitely the summoning scene, I recommend you guys watch it. It looks like nothing we've seen in Dragon Ball, where we see, you know, Purunga, or, you know, the Black Star Dragon Balls, or if we see, you know, even the regular Shenron coming out of the Dragon Balls. This transformation looked completely different, and it reminded me of the whole transformation of the Super Saiyan God that we saw in episode 9. And the animation looked 10 times better. So I felt that this episode shows that Super has no excuse for its animation and flaws. Now, if I were to just put an overall piece on this episode, you know, this episode was great. I thought it was fantastic. I probably would have given it 4 stars, but I thought that summoning scene of the Super Shenlong was so great that it just brought this episode up another notch, because I was just so impressed with what they were able to do. I also wish they put a little bit more of King Zeno in this episode, because he was probably the character that everybody was looking the most forward to, but they didn't, and I guess it was fine. So overall, I'm gonna have to give this episode a 5, and the whole scene inside of the Super Shenron's nucleus I thought was great. So moving on to my predictions for this episode, it's pretty simple. It looks like we're going to be seeing Goku facing Monaka, as we saw in the previews, and I thought that this was kind of a bizarre episode, because Beerus did promise, as I mentioned earlier, that he would give Monaka a chance to train with Goku. But the question is this going to be a gag episode that's going to be for comedic relief? Because we saw him with a Satan City uniform, which is showing like he's some type of disciple of Hercule. Or is this actually going to be a legitimate guy that's going to actually try and get strong in the Dragon Ball series? My prediction is that this is going to be a gag episode. It's going to be comic relief, because there's no possible way that Goku and Monaka could have a conventional fight by any means necessary. But I'm looking forward to watching this episode, and sometimes filler's good if it's done correctly, similar to how we saw in the Hercule episode, in which he was basically fighting against those invaders. So with everything else said, guys, this has been my review and my predictions for today. I hope you guys enjoyed everything I presented, and please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys, and Dragon Ball Super just continues to get better and better. Super Saiyan Dragon Ball Super is my hashtag of the day.